All right, welcome everybody to the first Joe Talk. We're very excited to have all of you here. Just wanted to do a quick introduction for who we are, as well as what the Joe Talks is all about. And I'll do a short introduction of our presenters today. We're very excited to have them here. We're very excited to be starting this initiative, and we're really excited about where this is going to be going forward. So, for those of you who are unfamiliar with our office, we fall under the Office of the Chief Republic of the United States. We have been for quite a while. In fact, the Army supported the first Best Picture winner back in 1927, the movie Wings. So we've been doing this for quite a while. The way this office is constructed today, it was back in 1952. We stood up this office to support positive representations of the Army in entertainment media. And I think everybody that's out there now will see that the strategic impact of representations in entertainment media are pretty obvious. Research and statistics reinforce that for subjects that the American public is unfamiliar with, they get a lot of their knowledge and understanding of a topic from entertainment media, which is why we've been out here for 7 decades trying to assist you all to tell our story. So first and foremost, I'll introduce myself. I'm Lieutenant Colonel Brett Lee. I've been the Deputy Director out here since August of 2019. We also have Mr. Kenneth Hawes, who is on the line as well. He's our Director. He's been as our civilian since 2008. And we also have our NCO, Sergeant First Class Nathan Hutchison, who's been here since this summer. So we are a small team, but we feel like we punch above our weight for what we get done out here. We're really proud to be doing it on behalf of Brigadier General Hanna and our communication mission. So without further ado, I'll just sort of lay out the guidelines of what the Joe Talks are about. Our endeavor is to connect with you all directly through these forums at least once a month, to inform you about the Army mission, our operations and initiatives, as well as the men and women who serve in our uniform and serve our nation. We want to inform you about all of that, but then we also want to inspire you to tell our story. We want to help you tell our story because we think it's a pretty good one. So for the purposes of this first engagement, we will be using the hands up and the Q&A feature. Once our speakers are done with their initial presentation, we'll take Q&A questions and answers. We'll have a few questions for them as well. So if you have a question, please put it in the Q&A box. Okay. So we're really happy to have from the Joint Program Executive Office for Chemical, Biological, Radiological, Nuclear Defense, Dr. Jason Roos, who is the program executive. And we're really excited to have him here. We also have the Joint Program Manager for CBRND-Medical, Colonel Ryan Eckmeier. So thank you to both gentlemen for coming on to our first Joe Talks. Very quick, I won't steal any of their thunder to explain what it is to do, but I will say that it is a civilian military multidisciplinary organization whose mission is to protect U.S. joint forces from all the previous threats that I just mentioned. He is a PhD, also holds a Bachelor of Arts in Chemistry from the College of Holy Cross, as well as his PhD in Biochemistry, Cellular, and Molecular Biology from Johns Hopkins. And he also, because it's an impressive resume, you have to go through all of these. He's got a Master's of Science in National Resource Strategy from the Eisenhower School at the National Defense University. So I think he's going to know what he's talking about today. Colonel Ryan Eckmeier, like I said, the Joint Program Manager, Project Manager, for CBRND-Medical, is responsible for medical countermeasures against CBRN threats, as well as diagnostic efforts in support of the nation's chemical and biological defense. He was commissioned from Western Illinois University ROTC program in 1997. He holds an MBA and an MA from Webster University, as well as an MA in Applied Economics from Oklahoma, and a Master's in National Security Studies from the U.S. Army War College. So 2 very impressive gentlemen here with us today. So I would like to, at this point, turn it over to them for their comments. And thank you, gentlemen.
Good afternoon, everyone. How are you doing today? You guys hear me okay, I think? Yeah, probably not. Let me take this off. Ooh, that's much better. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for your time today. I'm Jason Roos. Colonel Lee, thank you for that introduction. I appreciate it. So what you're looking at with that mask and what I have on here, the suit, the gloves, the boots, this is the state of the art for chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear defense. This is the standard piece of equipment that we give our military to protect them from those threats. As you can see, it's a coat, it's a mask, these boots and gloves. So just imagine for a moment being in the Middle East, running across the desert, being shot at, trying to take cover, what that must be like. Imagine trying to fire a weapon, especially through that mask. Imagine trying to drive a vehicle, a truck, a car. Imagine trying to use a phone. I mean, I don't think I could text or do anything right now with this without fumbling around. Try using a computer. Imagine trying to go grocery shopping. Could you imagine walking around Wegmans with something like this on? Well, with COVID, we got lucky. And fortunately, we don't have to wear this kind of stuff as we go around our daily basis and everything. We get to wear a mask in our normal clothes. Unfortunately, our adversaries, they're cooking up much worse things than COVID. And it's the reason why we've got to prepare this type of equipment in order to protect our military. Our job here at the JPEO for ChemBio Rad Nuke Defense is to develop the protective gear like I'm wearing right now, to be able to protect against those threats, to develop the tools to be able to find those threats and sniff them out, tools to be able to treat those threats, and then the tools to be able to destroy those threats. Whether we're talking about COVID or we're talking about a threat from our adversary, at the end of the day, the response is going to be the same. And as a result, the Department of Defense and the Army have been pulled into this national response for COVID because it looks a lot like we normally do. It looks like a lot like what we would do in a biological event. And so we've brought to bear the people, the process, the infrastructure, a lot of other tools to the table to help and assist in this national response. So we can talk a little bit about that today and to turn it over to our lead for medical, Colonel Ryan Eckmeier.
Hello, everybody, and thanks for that introduction, Brett. So I would just like to start by saying all of the things that we were able to do were enabled by our partnerships and our people. So all of the folks that we have on the bench to develop things like this is our next generation diagnostic system that I'll talk about in a minute. All of those things, that looks decidedly complex, right? Simple yet complex, because it's going to be a diagnostic device that you can use for clinical diagnosis. Well, a lot of the things that we did in response to this, in late 2019, started hearing things coming out of other parts of the world. We started what we do. We go through our processes. We say, this is what we may have. And then the genomic sequence was released in early January. And we started looking at what the things that we had on the shelf and what things we could develop. So one of the things you need to do is be able to know when somebody has, like this, during this pandemic, has COVID-19. This device, with the help of several of our partners across the DoD and academia and industry, were able to develop a emergency use authorization diagnostic device, a diagnostic assay test to use that in about 40 minutes, you can get a result of whether you're positive or negative. So that sounds really complex, right? And we have a whole group of folks, subject matter experts, that are the world's best at what they do, be it manufacturing for drug development, be it all these other component pieces for diagnostics. But believe it or not, the most unsexy things of all these complex things that we do ended up bringing us to our knees. And here's an example of that. And so as we were sitting there working with all of our partners across the DoD, as well as academia and industry, a global supply chain. I called it supply chain whack-a-mole. The first thing to kind of go up was the nasopharyngeal swab. Some of you may have been swabbed by this. It's the brain catcher. This nasopharyngeal swab, and I'll go open it up here in a minute. And no, Dr. Roos, I'm not going to take a swab. But as you can see, this is just a simple nasopharyngeal swab, and this is what gets the sample from the back of the nasopharyngeal area to go into the okay, you got it? So I'm holding up a pen, so just a comparison if you haven't been swabbed. I know a lot of you may have been swabbed, but I just wanted to highlight this as an example. So this is a 3D printed swab, and it's sterilized by a third party that our team, in conjunction with several other folks across the DoD, were able to do rather quickly to meet a critical need, because globally, no one had any of these swabs. In addition to that, while we're trying to solve this, our Chief Technology Officer, Dr. Kevin Wingard, happened to be having an emergency root canal done. And they pulled out another device that looks a lot like this, and he says, that's that micro brush that they use to go into your mouth. He says, why can't we repurpose that and use that as a nasopharyngeal swab? Actually, about 4 weeks later, with the help of the Office of the Surgeon General, Medical Research and Development Command, and other partners across DoD, we were able to get that as a Class 1 device to be able to be used through the FDA. So just scratching the surface of the things that the team did, and building and cementing those relationships that we had to be able to enable us to respond. So, I mean, from the complex to the unbelievably simple that you wouldn't think would ever be a problem. That's exactly, and we're finding more of those every day throughout the entire global supply chain as more people demand, all of the component pieces that build a therapeutic drug or a vaccine or syringes or vials or any of the component pieces, all the thousands of plastic pieces and metal pieces that fit inside this nice little device right here. All of those have been illuminated because everybody in the globe is looking for those. And unfortunately, the state-of-the-art device or outfit that Dr. Roos is wearing, I guess we could probably nip this in the bud overnight, right, sir? We just put 7 billion plus people in the world in a suit such as that and put them in full PPE. So, but that's just not feasible. So with that, all these things, and I'll just turn it back over to you, sir.
Yeah, thanks, Colonel. So this pandemic has clearly really brought, a lot of turmoil to our lives. It has really slowed us down, and it's in many ways brought our lives to a complete halt. But it's not just us on the personal side; it's the military as well. Early on, many of you may know or have seen the Teddy Roosevelt. One of the military's biggest demonstration of its power, of its might, its threat deterrence is an aircraft carrier. The USS Teddy Roosevelt got bit by COVID. Over 20% of the sailors got bit by COVID and had to pull into port in Guam. Unfortunately, we lost a sailor in that as well. That's a really bad day. Not only because we lost a soldier or a sailor, but not only because we had 20% of the people offline, but our show of force in the Pacific was sitting in a dock in Guam. A very bad day for us. Also, what you may not be aware of is our training base. The folks that are the next generation of soldiers, sailor, airmen, and Marines also came to a halt. The Army had to stop training for several weeks. And just to put that into perspective for you, that translates to the Army trains about 75,000 people a year. In fact, I didn't even know that prior to this year. It's a lot of people. So you take the Army training offline for weeks, now you're talking about thousands of people that are no longer moving into the pipeline. So it's significant impact, let alone the Pentagon. Pentagon bustling with over 20,000 people a day. It looked like a scene from The Shining with virtually nobody in those halls. It was freaky at midday. Tremendous impact to the department, tremendous impact to our military. And so Colonel Eckmeier talked about the diagnostics. But in addition to diagnostics, and that's what we had early, we needed something before we could start to fill the gap with vaccines. Okay, so we had to start working on vaccines, and we needed therapeutics, and we needed something to go after and target this disease. And so we put a lot of energy and effort into what could we do to accelerate those vaccines and accelerate those therapeutics. Well, fortunately, and it's a big target area for us, is our ability to rapidly respond. And so we pulled off the shelf and we reached out to our industry partners that have been working on what are other vaccines and other therapeutics for other targets and adopted them for COVID. And the ability to go quickly, so you see the Pfizer vaccine and the Moderna vaccine, the ability to go quickly was we were able to take that fundamental technology and now apply it very quickly to COVID. 10 years is the typical pathway to develop a vaccine. Mumps, I think, was 4 years. This is the fastest we had done to date. We're looking at having developed a vaccine in a year across the US government. That's pretty remarkable. And in the meantime, we've also been able to get, you probably heard about monoclonal antibodies. If you watch the news at night, you can see countless examples, Humira and Tevio, some of those things. Those are monoclonal antibodies. Repurpose now that same fundamental technology to go after COVID, allowed us to go fast. Department of Defense and the Army is playing a critical role in help enabling bringing those capabilities to the US public, bringing those capabilities to the Department of Defense. And so the ability to go fast has really been enabled by taking some risk and doing things in parallel. It's a massive parallelization is the word I call it. So doing manufacturing while we're doing human studies, while we're doing animal studies, doing that all at once and working very closely with the FDA. So another area where we've been able to fill that gap on the therapeutic side is an area that Colonel Eckmeier has been working with his team in the therapeutic space.
Yeah, thanks, sir. And so I talked about the simple things, and all of these things are oversimplifications. Obviously, this is very tough work, and as Dr. Roos mentioned, 10 to 15 years, couple $1 billion to normally do drug development, and we're doing these in in months as opposed to years. But one of the specific things that we're going to be that has borne fruit for us is being able to take, and again, it's something uncool. It's not something that's got a lot of whiz bang to it, but you're taking a drug that is already on an indication for another to treat another disease or symptom or condition, and then you're repurposing it as you take apart the disease progression of COVID. So, at the very beginning, remember there was this shortage of ventilators, and we were involved working with our partners to help them on some of those pieces from an acquisition perspective. But also, now you don't hear a lot about ventilation anymore because a lot of those repurposed drugs treating those symptoms, and if I can say it correctly, the symptomology of those pieces across the disease progression to be able to find, what, this works against this. So we're trying to stop viral replication. So we don't want more SARS-CoV-2, the virus that causes COVID-19. We don't want more of those in our system. So we have a class of drugs that we're looking at and have proven out a couple of them to stop that viral replication, and then to stop the disease progression beyond that as far as the symptoms. So kind of two separate sides. So as we talk about all these things, and of course that takes a great team of subject matter experts that are world-renowned manufacturing experts, drug development experts, regulatory experts that are dealing with all these and reaching out to all of our partners, because I will say it again, nobody in this space does any of this alone. So having the ability to be a rate multiplier to go to our partners within the federal government, as well as in DoD, as well as into industry and academia, who we have standing relationships with. Just exciting to see. I know it's an oversimplification, and it's all going to be, but very, very, very difficult to do. And with that, sir, back to you.
Thanks, Colonel. So partnerships has been absolutely essential in this space, as the Colonel pointed out, across the interagency with Health and Human Services, as well as a whole host of other folks in the U.S. government. Department of Defense and the Army continues to play a very significant role in the fight against COVID, as well as our fight against the CBRN threats, the chem bio, rad nuke threats that our adversaries are trying to build and take on and throw at us. Our goal through the work that we're doing is to get in front of those threats, to get in front of that pandemic, so that the next time that something like this comes down the pike, we can respond even faster. We've done a phenomenal job, in my opinion, in terms of the time and what we've been able to do in just a year. But how do we get that from a year down to months, down to weeks, so that that next thing doesn't take us offline as far as we've been? And as it relates to the department, one of the things that I think about as we're going through this is how do we put the next captain of the Theodore Roosevelt in a position where the next time this happens, the next time some sailors get sick, he's able or she's able to press on and continue to do their job. So thank you for your time, and I look forward to the questions.
Thank you, gentlemen. That's very impressive. I'm glad that we've got you guys up there working on this. You kind of hit on this quite a bit. In the Army, as well as most of our American military, we pride ourselves on after-action reviews. The last time that we were affected by a pandemic was obviously the Spanish flu, 1917, 1918 timeframe. What you're describing is a whole of government response. So what do you foresee as we start to war game what happened in this pandemic, how to avoid the next epidemic becoming a pandemic?
Want to start?
Yeah, well, I think there in one of the flyers, I think at least one of the things that I saw as a preview to this is I think there's a question that we're struggling with across the interagency right now. Does it really matter if it's an engineered threat? Does it really matter if it's naturally occurring or endemic to a location? Does it really matter if an adversary actually intended for it to do these nasty things that biological agents, biological pathogens, whether they be viral or bacterial, are going to do? So I think that is a key question that I think all of us that have now partnered and have spent so much time together working on all this, leveraging everybody's expertise across the Department of Defense as well as HHS and our other partners that I mentioned like several times earlier. But I think that's one of the key questions. And then how do you prepare yourself to be able to do that, not only to a biological warfare agent, but also to a naturally occurring disease such as SARS-CoV-2, sir?
Yeah, and so as we look at as how things played out, the partnership, as I mentioned to you before, I can't understate enough. The Department of Defense brings a lot of capabilities. The Army brings a lot of capabilities to the table to complement those from our civilian agencies. And so as we move forward, ensuring that we have that continued partnership is going to be a lesson learned. As we look from a technical perspective, as we, I talked about the platforms in my comments there, how we're able to quickly adopt to the ever-changing threat is going to be critical. So the threat landscape continues to evolve and change. I mean, we've seen chemical attacks in the Middle East. We just saw not too long ago, Navalny, the Russian that's outspoken against Putin, was poisoned with a novel chemical agent. We saw that in Salisbury. We saw Ebola. We're seeing a very ever-changing landscape. And so our ability to go fast is really going to be ensuring that we have an investment and a continued focus on staying out front and preventing the next thing. And what we do, as Colonel Eckmeier said, is not always sexy. Sometimes we're considered an insurance program. And in insurance, you want to pay as little as possible, and you want to get as much when you need it. Well, this is an area where we probably, as a nation, need to ensure that we're putting a little bit more energy and emphasis in it, so that next time, as I talked about, we can respond quicker, we can react faster, and heck, be even better if we could prevent it from happening in the first place.
That's great, gentlemen. Thank you. I think, part of the reason we're out here is that we want to help entertainment professionals to tell accurate and authentic stories of our men and women who serve in uniform. So we understand that there will probably be any number of non-scripted and scripted projects coming out of this time period. And so our most recent examples of the last 20 years or so was the movie Outbreak and the movie Contagion. And without becoming Siskel and Ebert, just was sort of wanting to know, what did you see in those very popular representations of a viral outbreak that you think is accurate and people should understand from a government response? What do you think maybe veers a little off from that and you prefer to see captured in a different way with future projects?
Yeah, well, I actually thought, this specific, this pandemic is the Contagion movie actually is pretty representative and had high marks from the scientific community as well as how one would respond. I mean, I think one of the review points was, how did you know it was going to be a bat? and potentially this was a bat, even though I think the jury's out a little bit, but potentially this was a bat as well that was the source of this pandemic. So and of course there was the infectiousness was roughly about the same, and it introduced the folks to R-naughts as far as being able to talk about how infectious a disease was, and folks kind of understood that from the movie. So I think that was all of those things were, I think a lot of the examples within the movie really were pretty representative of what you would see with the CDC involvement and and then basically the threats that all of this gives to a globalized society. I mean, if you're flying if you're flying over 3 different locations and you're stopping in every location, that's one more chance for you to infect somebody else, even if you don't even know you have it. And we've seen that with this too. So I think that's my thoughts on that, sir.
Yeah, I think especially with Contagion, it did a really good job of.
That was Nipah virus too. That kind of was generally based on.
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, and I think they did a very good job of portraying the fear associated with this. And if we take ourselves back to March. And it's frankly, it's something we're sort of dealing with right now. Is we've been studying flu for over a century, and we still don't fully understand flu. Right. We've been studying SARS-CoV-2 for a year at best, 10 months. And we might have had a little bit of a head start with SARS-1 or MERS, but I think the movie, certainly Contagion did a good job of sort of portraying that fear associated with really the unknown about the effect of the disease, how contagious, how lethal it is, etc. And that's an important piece to convey. What we saw, play out, before us is certainly Armageddon didn't happen. There's a lot of fear, but obviously. We still were able to get our food and everything eventually after those initial supply chain shocks. So outbreak was, it's funny, the whole thing about outbreak that we always used to joke about is, the speed, they Dustin Hoffman, they inject the animal and all of a sudden, miraculously 10 minutes later, they got the antidote and everybody lives. And there was I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, that was science fiction. Now we're talking about that. I mean, that's what I was talking about in terms of speed, is the ability to
plasma. And
the tools to be able to quickly generate those therapeutics and those antidotes. Now, I don't think we're going to get there. I don't think we're there that fast yet. But we're not as far off of that as we used to be. And that's really, honestly, I think the holy grail for this is to really be able to react quickly to an ever-changing threat environment, whether it's brought to us by Mother Nature or our adversaries. Those are my 2 comments.
And that's one of the reasons why we're looking specifically at symptomology and being able to treat it across. Because if somebody's going to get sick and they're normally going to be sick for 10 days and recover, especially for DOD, we want to get somebody. Well, we want to shorten that time. We want to get them back into whatever they were doing, whether it be training, whether it be a fight that we're in. So we want to get them back in as quickly as possible. So as much as you can shorten that disease progression and shorten it down, or how long they're going to be laying on their back not doing anything, the better. So that's exactly how we've been attacking this, through mechanisms of action and through symptomology.
Yeah.
That's great. I'm going to ask one more question, and then if anybody on the line wants to ask a question, just put it in the Q&A box or raise your hand. So I can see that. So obviously, like I said before, there's going to be a lot of nonfiction and fiction depictions of this time period. But you all, like you said before, you respond to a multitude of threats. So obviously understanding that this is an open source environment, what really scares you guys that if you wanted someone to depict that in a future potentially fictional scenario, what keeps you up at night beyond COVID-19?
Well, I think, thanks for that, Brett. I think one of the things about that is going back to Contagion, or if you remember Contagion, I think I get my numbers mixed up, but for COVID, I think we're in the 1.5% mortality rate. So that means 1.5% of people who contract the disease die. And I think in Contagion, it was in the 30 percentile or higher, or even higher than that, like in Ebola, which is Dr. Roos mentioned as a response that has happened in the past. I think that's to me we've actually kind of war gamed this, or actually gone through some scenarios where, well, what if this next strain becomes, and I'm knocking on some wood, right? Make sure we're not jinxing ourselves here, but what if this a next strain, or SARS-CoV-3, or COVID-23 has a 35% mortality rate, and then how in the exactly what Dr. Roos was talking about rapid response and being able to invest in being prepared, having that group of subject matter experts, world-class subject matter experts on the bench to be able to immediately pivot and work with all of our partners and focus on those emerging threats. I think that's one of the things that, from a biologics perspective, from bio, that would really scare me about something that's going to, people are not going to recover. If you get it, you die. That kind of line of thinking, and then what that would do to, the fabric of America and the world. So. Yeah,
I mean, I echo those concerns. I mean, that's what I said early on in my opening remarks, as we got lucky. This is really a dress rehearsal, and I've heard somebody refer to this. This is like getting shot with a BB as opposed to a howitzer. So from the lethality of this disease, I certainly, something that's more lethal but equally as transmissible in the population would be frightening. I mean, I guess if you really want to ratchet it up a little bit more, is you sprinkle in a little bit of aerosol transmission, so that takes the whole 6 feet apart off the table. Mm-hmm. We were fortunate that the particles sort of fall out of the air and don't just continuously float. That would be a whole different game if we were dealing with that. And not to geek out on you too much, but the virus that we have that we're dealing with, when early on when we were talking about, hey, is this thing going to mutate like the flu? Are we going to see sort of the waves that we saw with the 1918 strains? And a lot of the scientists sort of said, well, it's got some ways of making sure it doesn't mutate as rapidly, but a disease that mutated as rapidly as flu or something like HIV, which actually mutates faster and more than flu itself, that would be pretty scary, because then you're constantly playing a game of catch up. It feels like we might be there already a little bit with COVID. And what's unique about this experience is there's never been a global response to an infectious disease that is so quickly and rapidly started to push it back. And so I think that's part of why we're seeing some of these variants emerge. So scary crazy for me is more lethal, spreads through the air, and mutates really fast. That'd be a really bad day, in my opinion.
Well, let's hope for that not to happen. Jen Nicholson from your office is actually going to read our questions. I'm having fun seeing. She's going to read them for you.
Okay, great.
Project my voice because you guys have the mics, gentlemen. How will this experience with COVID and working with all of the partners you mentioned change the way the Army and the DoD does business in the future in an effort to mitigate future threats? What are you working on now, and what's next?
Can I take first stab?
Please.
Yeah, so I think it's a great question. The question is how is this going to help us in the future and in our efforts? And in addition to the things Dr. Roos said, if you remember back a comment that I made about this repurposing effort where we're taking drugs and looking at the symptomology and the disease progression, and to be clear, he's a scientist. I'm not a scientist. I have the experts that I work with on my team. I'm very, very proud of them, but I am not a scientist. But when you look at the disease progression and you look and what we've been able to find, when you look at disease progression of some of the biological warfare agent threats that we're developing countermeasures for as part of our core programs and core missions, is that we're seeing across that symptomology of disease progression where if we're able to use, we want to stop viral replication. Well, we have a drug that can stop viral replication and it's on indication for this thing. Well, all we have to do, this is really simple, just do a couple of studies with human subjects or that have COVID to prove that out, and then show that would be transferable to the disease progression on one of our biological warfare agents. So I wish it was that easy. I mean, it's not that's not easy, oversimplification. But I wish it was a case that we could do that for vaccines, because it would be great to never get it in the first place, or only get it so mildly that it never caused a problem at all, and then you wouldn't have a need for all of these diagnostic devices and therapeutics and keeping people out of hospitals and trying to keep them off ventilators. But I think that's one of the great things. And plus, the relationships, the partnerships that we have. So while we had partnerships before and we had great friends and great colleagues that we worked with within DoD, the federal government, as well as industry and academia, we have cemented those relationships. I mean, and when I mean cemented those relationships, I mean cemented those relationships. They call us. We kind of now know where the subject matter experts are sprinkled throughout all of our formations. We're on working groups together. We tackle problems together in a collegial manner without a whole bunch of rigmarole, and just get after it. And so I think that sense of urgency and that sense of comradeship that goes along with tackling a thing as big as this, plus all the things we're learning for the future, I think there's a lot of benefit there. So, sir?
Yeah, so I'll amplify that a little bit. So we've always enjoyed a good, close working relationship, with our interagency partners, particularly Health and Human Services, Department of Homeland Security, et cetera. However, this experience, I can't emphasize enough the cementing aspect of it. But when you're working arm in arm with somebody in a crisis, nights, weekends, you name it, having to get information quickly up to leadership, White House, et cetera, you form a bond and a relationship that's just very different than sort of the transactional, casual relationships that you have on a day-to-day basis. And in the past, we would share what we're doing, we talk about what we're doing, make sure there's good cross-pollination, but to really lock arms and work something together really, honestly, is transformational. And I truly hope and I see that moving forward, it's going to transform how we do business together. I think you're going to see less of DoD does this and HHS does this, but where are we working together on projects and bringing our inherent core capabilities where they're bringing theirs together, and together we're getting after some of these challenges. The irony of this is it was about a month before COVID really hit in full effect, just before the new year, last year. We were having a discussion with some of our interagency partners and some other folks about, hey, we really need to do a national level exercise on the rapid response and where are the gaps and seams in our ability to rapidly respond to an unanticipated, unknown threat. And never imagined that we would be living that national exercise day in and day out. So I think we are, learning some of the seams and gaps that are coming out in this as well. Is an area where we're targeting and looking to put investment and doing that together with our partners.
And we've also talked about gap fillers for those seams and gaps that we've identified that could happen with any biological warfare agent or any kind of pathogen, whether it be viral or bacterial, that would show up. So I think that's obviously, yes, sir.
Yeah.
All right, so our next question. Are there a lot of female soldiers wearing biochemical suits pursuing this career field, protecting our forces for chemical attacks?
I don't know the numbers of the breakdowns, but that is the suit for every soldier, every yeah, that is the suit for everybody in the Department of Defense, whether you be Navy, Marine Corps, yeah, Army, or Air Force. So, I mean, so as much as there are people, I think you said career field, so I don't know the numbers you're talking about career field for like the folks that would be working this in a ground unit as opposed to like a scientist, but I would say that is the uniform. So if there's 25% females in DoD that are in uniform, that's how many wear it. So, I apologize, I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but that is the suit of DoD.
Yeah, we are. I mean, the joint aspect of our name and our title, what we do is, although we're Army, I'm an Army civilian, Colonel Eckmeier's an Army officer. Our customer base is the entire military, so soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines. And this suit, as Colonel pointed out, is what everybody wears, and so nothing specific for male, female on this. Right. It's designed for everyone in the military.
14%.
No.
Well, there you go.
14%.
14%.
All right, your next question. If you know and you can speak of this, how fast will first deployed and follow-on support troops? How fast are they being vaccinated? How fast are the first deployed and the follow-on support troops being vaccinated? That's part one. Part two is how long before the forces are prepared to respond immediately? So I think they're trying to get at how are they getting vaccinated? Like if a unit was going into combat and you've got the first troops going in, are they getting vaccinated? And then how long for the follow-on support?
I give it a shot. So I don't know the numbers specifically, but I do know and have been a part of, because we supply and work with them to try to solve some of the supply chain and acquisition problems that show up. But there is a DoD-wide vaccination program based on priorities, just like there's a nationwide vaccination program based on priorities. But to be able to talk specifically to those pieces, that's not something I just don't know those other pieces. I don't know, sir, if you had anything to add on that.
No, I other than just that they're working through a prioritization within the department, but not something can really get too much into the detail on that.
I think you'll both love this question. What role or connection does the JPO have with Operation Warp Speed?
Good.
I'll start that one. Yeah. So we've been playing a pretty significant role. Really, it's our organization in tandem with many other organizations. You'll see in the press, you can Google a lot. You can Google our name and you'll see us pop up in multiple different places. So one role that we've been playing pretty significantly is helping them put together the contracts and doing all the deals, if you will, the negotiations with the companies that are under the umbrella of Operation Warp Speed, or what was previously referred to as Operation Warp Speed. But we do that in partnership with our Army Contracting Command, which is our main folks that do all of our contracts, as well as the legal support we get from folks out at Fort Detrick in the Medical Research Development Command, as well as other DoD agencies that provide audit support and contract management support. So it's really a team effort. But the Department of Defense, they're very good at putting contracts in place. We do a lot of business with the defense industrial base and with others. And so we've brought that to bear in this situation. And the JPEO, from a program management side, has been sort of honchoing and leading those efforts. We've also supplied many subject matter expertise, so other scientists that are contributing to the teams and program managers that are helping run the teams that are running specific vaccine programs or specific therapeutic programs. So folks that are fully embedded day in, day out with that team, haven't slept, haven't eaten, haven't had holiday in a long period of time. So we're contributing people in force to that. And then also assisting with some of the industrial base expansion efforts of trying to ensure that the capabilities, the unsexy things that are needed to feed a vaccine or needed to feed a diagnostic or some type of treatment are available. So vials, needles, swabs,
swabs,
fill finish capabilities, manufacturing capabilities. So we've really been applying our skills and our people and our strengths to partner with the folks at at the operation and as well as part of Health and Human Services. I don't know if there's any more you want to add.
No, just I think one of the main pieces that I'd like to add, sir, is that as Dr. Roos mentioned, all the people and the subject matter expertise, very unique, very niche capability areas where you can find somebody that has that drug development experience and those things, and bringing those folks together, and they've been able to do that. In my specific area, for example, my specific area where I sit right now as a program manager within the medical community, I can count all of the ones that are my peers on two hands. So, and over half of them are working with the operation for the federal response. So, very niche area, very, very highly sought after area. But again, there's just not a lot to draw from, and so their expertise being leveraged. But yes, it is about the people.
So we have 4 questions left, and 2 of them are pretty similar. So I'm going to try to put
Sure.
those 2 together. Part 1 of the question is, do we have enough MOP gear for all of the United States Army? And then have either one of you seen a ramp up, an increase in the production of the biological suits and masks? And if you can talk about it, is it because of an increase in a potential threat, or is it just standard production?
Yeah. So the way it works in terms of how we do our business is we get the requirements from the services that say, hey, we need a suit that can protect us against X, Y, and Z, and we need X amount of those suits at any given time. And so what our job is to do is not only to develop the capability that actually will do that job, but then also stand up the production line and the capabilities so that can be maintained over time. So the Department of Defense writ large always maintains a certain stockpile and level of these suits that they can ebb and flow and surge based on contingencies. And so there's a planning factors that go into if we're going to go to war and there's going to be this amount of people involved. This is how many suits that we need to have available. This is how many suits each soldier, sailor, airman, Marine will get as part of those operations. So that's constantly happening in the background, so that they're not having to, just because something's happening today or tomorrow, having to ebb and flow on that. The flow and the production, and typically what we try to do is, a lot of the companies that develop these pieces of gear are not, giant companies. And so the other thing that we try to do is ensure that there's a steady supply, because you don't want to be in a position where you ramp up production, get everything put on the shelf, let it sit for 10 years, and then come back 10 years later and have to ramp up again. So we try to make sure we balance that so we can keep a steady industrial warm base doing the manufacturing, keeps people employed, and ensures that we have a ready supply that we can surge at any point in time.
All right, so we have 2 more questions, and we're getting close on our time here, so we'll wrap up with these 2. How has COVID affected our deployed troops and the missions they are over there to accomplish? So our deployed troops, has COVID affected our missions?
Well, I think what you'll see is that it affected deployed troops in locations. So it's no secret that folks in the military tend to be a lot closer, and then we don't have separate hotel rooms in faraway places when you're deployed. You might be on top of each other. So it has affected, but a lot of the mitigation strategies that work for the entire public, for the entire nation, and for the entire world, as far as the distance, as far as the hand washing, as far as those kinds of things, when you implement those, you kind of mitigate that risk to a certain perspective. But to say it has affected the deployed personnel, it obviously has, because it's affected everybody in the world. But I think the same mitigating strategies and a couple extra that we do based on the unique pieces of the military, I think are working. And we build a lot of tests to put out there not we ourselves, but our partners build a lot of tests to be able to enable those forces to continue doing their mission, which they do.
Right.
Hope that answered it.
One more question. Last question. Are you finding that working with the private sector as much as you are, helps close the gap of understanding between civilian and military processes?
Well, I can start, sir.
Yeah, go ahead.
So for, I mean, when I made the mention of the military folks, kind of like me, as far as medical acquisition people, there's a larger uniform folks, and we are working daily. I mean, this is my boss, and he's a civilian. It is a military civilian organization that we work in, and so for within the federal government, within DoD, being able, I mean, you have to have all kinds. You have to have, it doesn't matter where you get the talent, as far as if you get the talent from a civilian or military. Now, when we go externally to our industry partners, do I think it's bridged the gap? I think it's helped, and that's just my opinion. I don't have any statistics to be able to tell you, but we're a lot of the communication pieces are because it's so urgent and so acute. It's let's get on the phone, let's get everybody on the phone, let's let everybody ask all their questions, and let's make sure that everybody understands, because we don't have time to dilly-dally. So that's, I don't have any stats to tell you, but I would just say I would hope so.
Yeah.
I would think so. At least in my experience, I've seen that it has.
Yeah, I would say that, so I've had more conversations with CEOs and senior vice presidents
yeah.
and folks in industry, honestly, than I've had my entire career.
Yeah.
As I mentioned to you before, we're doing a lot of support for the operation. We also have an entire portfolio within the department that we're doing in terms of vaccine development and therapeutics. That's sort of an enabler, if you will, and a complementary to the operation. So the combination of those two things, I mean, we've been dealing with industry nonstop. And I think it's done, so we would not be here and would not be as far along as we have been without the support of our industry partners. And that includes commercial industry, that includes academia, that includes some of our non-government organizations. I mean, it really has been truly tapping into all of those entities, big and small. And I think through this experience, we've learned a lot. One of the key things in negotiation is you always want to understand what the other side wants and try to find a middle ground. Well, I've done more dealings with major pharmaceutical companies, like I said, than in my life, and I probably will ever do again. And understanding what a big pharmaceutical company wants and what's driving their equities and interest in developing a vaccine or a therapeutic, understanding what we want, finding that middle ground, has been a learning experience for both sides that I absolutely think will translate into how we do business in the future, and how we potentially change some of the rules and laws about how we do contracting and how we manage those types of efforts. So I think it absolutely has been an education process for all of us. Some growing pains, of course, along the way, but I'm very hopeful of what comes out on the other end.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much. Jen, if you want to put up that last slide there. I would just say thank you, speaking on behalf of all the men and women that serve the nation. Thank you on what you all have done through probably your most challenging professional experience in the last 10 months, and I'm assuming so based on your discussions. Thank you for everything you've done to be part of this whole of government approach to responding to this threat that is not only devastated hundreds of thousands of families in this country, but millions worldwide. So, on our behalf, thank you for what you do.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, Jen, hopefully that slide is up. I'm not sure. I know we're having trouble with our camera here to see whether that's up or not. But I just wanted to say thank you to everybody who has participated in this first Joe Talks. We hope that it's met your expectations. We will send out a note after this just to ask for your impressions of what you liked and didn't like, but also potential topics. So we do want to talk about the next Joe Talk, which will be February 24th, again at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. We will be, as you all know, in the entertainment industry, you're well aware that diversity representation in entertainment media is critically important. You all want your projects to reflect what this nation looks like. It is a diverse nation, and it's where our strength is derived from. Well, the Army is the same way. We want the folks that wear our uniform to look like the country that it's defending. So our next Joe Talk is going to feature Dr. Anselm Beach, who is the Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Army for Equity and Inclusion Agency. He is spearheading the Project Inclusion effort, which is the Army's holistic effort to listen to our soldiers, civilians, and family members, and enact initiatives to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion. So a vitally important initiative that the Army is spearheading with the intent to give a voice to our teammates in the Army so that they can undertake a comprehensive effort to identify bias, any bias at all, and to mitigate it. So Mr. Beach directs the daily operations and executes one of those comprehensive complaints adjudication processes, proactive management, and prevention programs within the federal government. So within the Project Inclusion umbrella, there are various initiatives: the Army Diversity Plan, Army People Strategy, and the updated White House Executive Order on Diversity Training. So I think it's going to be a great topic because I think it hits right where you all in the entertainment industry are focused. You're focused on making sure that you have projects that reflect the nation, and it's vitally important to us. And like I said, that the soldiers that represent this nation look like this nation. So this is a very holistic effort to get after that. So with that, I'd like to just say thank you, and thank you to Dr. Roos and Colonel Eckmeier again for coming on this very first trial run, possibly not knowing totally what they were getting into. But obviously a super relevant topic for right now, and I think it's something that we all needed to hear today. So you definitely made me feel better. So thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Yep, thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you, everybody. We'll see you again February 24th.